Nothing about that night warned anyone to be careful. The cafe felt safe in a way that lowers the guard without asking permission. Warm lights, familiar faces, and casual laughter filled the space, creating the quiet confidence that nothing could possibly go wrong. Conversations flowed easily, chairs moved without thought, and time passed slowly, as if the night had already been decided. Among friends sat Bruce Lee, unnoticed and unremarkable at first glance. He showed no tension, no urgency, and no visible readiness. He didn't scan the room or demand space. He blended into the moment so completely that it invited underestimation, and that invitation would prove costly. Because the most dangerous moments don't announce themselves with chaos. They arrive gently, wrapped in comfort, at the exact moment everyone believes nothing important is about to happen. Comfort begins its work quietly. It does not announce that it is changing behavior, and that is why it is so effective. When a space feels safe, the mind slowly relaxes its grip on awareness. People stop checking small details because nothing has demanded their attention yet. The brain interprets calm as confirmation that everything is under control, and once that belief settles in, vigilance feels unnecessary. As comfort grows, behavior shifts without conscious decision. Conversations become louder and less guarded. Body language opens up. People lean back instead of forward. Attention turns inward toward personal thoughts, stories, and laughter rather than outward toward the environment. Observation gives way to assumption, because assumption feels efficient and effortless. Why keep watching closely when nothing seems to require it? This process is gradual, not sudden. No one decides to stop paying attention. It simply happens as the mind prioritizes ease over alertness. People react only to what stands out clearly, ignoring subtle changes because subtlety does not feel urgent. Tone shifts go unnoticed. Timing feels irrelevant. Small irregularities are dismissed as meaningless because the overall atmosphere feels stable. That sense of stability settled deeply into the cafe. The space had already proven itself harmless in everyone's memory. It was familiar, predictable, and emotionally comfortable. No one felt the need to monitor the entrance. No one adjusted their position based on who walked in or how they moved. Distance between tables and people felt unimportant because the room trusted itself. Once a place believes it understands itself, it stops questioning what enters it. The environment becomes mentally labeled as safe, and that label filters perception. Anything that does not fit the idea of safety is minimized or ignored. People see what they expect to see, not what is actually present. This filtering is not careless in intention, but it is careless in effect. Comfort also creates a shared blindness. When everyone relaxes together, no one notices that attention has thinned. Each person assumes someone else would notice if something were wrong. That assumption spreads silently through the room, reinforcing itself without evidence. The absence of concern becomes proof that concern is unnecessary. This is how vulnerability forms without fear. Not through panic or distraction, but through ease. The room did not feel exposed because exposure rarely feels dangerous at the moment it happens. It feels calm. It feels normal. It feels finished. The cafe had reached that point. It believed nothing unexpected could occur because nothing unexpected had occurred yet. That belief did not make the space dangerous on its own, but it removed the one thing that protects against sudden change: attention. When comfort replaces awareness, reaction replaces observation. People notice only what forces itself into view. Anything that develops quietly passes beneath perception. This is why comfort makes people careless, not by making them reckless, but by convincing them that care is no longer required. And once that belief takes hold, a room becomes vulnerable without ever realizing it has lowered its guard. The group did not arrive with noise or urgency. There was no sudden disruption to announce their presence, no sharp movement that demanded attention. They entered the cafe the same way many others had that night, slipping into the flow of the room as if they belonged there all along. Their voices were low, their expressions neutral, and their pace unhurried. On the surface, there was nothing unusual to notice. To most people, they registered as nothing more than new customers, another set of faces. Another reason chairs shifted and space adjusted slightly. The mind filed them away without effort and moved on. Comfort made that easy. When a place feels safe, unfamiliar faces lose their importance quickly. Yet there was something deliberate in the way they moved. Their casualness was practiced rather than natural. The distance they kept from one another was measured. Their attention was outward even when their behavior appeared relaxed. These details were subtle enough to escape notice, especially in a room that had already decided nothing unexpected could happen. Bruce Lee noticed immediately. Not because he was suspicious or alert in a visible way, but because he never disconnected from the present moment. His awareness was not sharp or tense. It was steady. He registered the timing of their entrance, the way their eyes moved before their bodies did, and the spacing they maintained as they settled into the room. None of this required effort. It was information arriving naturally to a mind that remained open. He did not react. His posture stayed the same. His expression did not change. He did not signal concern to his friends or shift his attention dramatically. Awareness does not always announce itself. Often, it looks exactly like calm. While others remained engaged in conversation, he remained engaged with the space itself. What separated him from everyone else was not readiness for conflict but refusal to disengage. Others had already decided the room was finished revealing itself. Bruce Lee had not. He allowed the moment to continue unfolding rather than rushing to label it as harmless. This difference mattered more than anyone realized. While others were absorbed in familiar rhythms, he remained aligned with the subtle changes taking place beneath them. He noticed how the group positioned themselves, how their movements slowed the room's energy almost imperceptibly, how their presence altered the atmosphere without creating noise. The arrival went unnoticed not because it was invisible, but because attention had already been withdrawn. The room had relaxed into assumption, and assumption filters perception aggressively. Anything that does not force itself into view is quietly ignored. Bruce Lee did not force anything into view. He did not interrupt the moment. He did not escalate it. He simply remained aware while others disengaged. That awareness did not grant him control in a dramatic sense. It granted him clarity, and clarity, once established, quietly reshapes what happens next. That is how the arrival went unnoticed by the room, but not by him. Many people misunderstand what readiness actually looks like. They believe it shows itself through visible alertness, quick movements, or immediate reactions. In most situations, reacting fast feels responsible. It gives the impression of control and preparedness. But Bruce Lee understood something that most people never learn. Reacting too early often hands control to the other side before the situation has fully revealed itself. When someone reacts prematurely, they confirm that they are responding to pressure rather than managing it. They reveal concern before concern is necessary. They turn uncertainty into momentum, allowing the situation to escalate instead of settle. Bruce Lee knew that the first visible reaction often determines who carries the psychological weight of the moment. That is why he did nothing. He did not shift in his seat. He did not adjust his posture to signal readiness. He did not alert his friends or change the tone of the space around him. From the outside, his behavior appeared unchanged, almost indifferent. But internally, awareness remained active. He was not waiting. He was observing. Bruce Lee allowed the moment to continue unfolding because he understood that intention exposes itself when it is not challenged too soon. People who arrive with purpose rely on reaction to validate their presence. When that reaction does not come, uncertainty begins to replace confidence. Questions form where certainty once existed. Is the moment being ignored, or is it being understood too well? By remaining calm, Bruce Lee refused to provide that validation. His stillness denied the other side the emotional feedback they expected. There was no fear to feed on, no resistance to push against, and no signal confirming that their presence had shifted the balance of the room. This was not passivity. It was restraint. Restraint is often mistaken for hesitation. But the two are very different. Hesitation comes from uncertainty. Restraint comes from clarity. Bruce Lee did not hesitate because he did not feel unsure. He restrained himself because he understood that movement, once made, cannot be taken back. Premature action narrows options. Once you react, you commit. Once you commit, you limit your ability to adapt. Bruce Lee preserved flexibility by staying exactly where he was, mentally and physically. That flexibility mattered more than speed or strength, because it kept every option available. As seconds passed without reaction, pressure began to shift. The expectation of response went unmet. The energy that had entered the room looking for engagement had nowhere to settle. Instead of drawing Bruce Lee into the moment, the moment began to turn inward on those who had initiated it. This is how pressure transfers quietly. When one side remains calm and unresponsive, the other side is forced to carry its own intent without assistance. Confidence that depends on reaction starts to weaken. Control that relies on escalation becomes unstable. Bruce Lee understood that the person who reacts first often loses leverage. By not reacting early, he allowed leverage to move naturally toward him without effort. The situation did not escalate because it had nothing to push against. Calm absorbed uncertainty rather than amplifying it. That single choice changed the entire direction of what followed. Without confrontation, without words, and without movement, pressure shifted across the room. The moment that had arrived with confidence now carried hesitation instead. This is why Bruce Lee did not react early. He knew that silence can delay outcomes long enough for clarity to replace assumptions. And once clarity takes hold, the moment no longer belongs to the one who arrived expecting control. The group began to move closer with quiet confidence. Their steps were measured, not rushed, guided by the belief that numbers alone would decide how this moment ended. In their minds, advantage had already been established. They expected hesitation to appear first, followed by uncertainty, and then fear. That sequence had worked before. It felt reliable. It felt inevitable. What they encountered instead was stillness that did not withdraw. There was no visible tension to exploit, no reaction to pressure, and no sign that their presence had shifted control. The calm they faced did not retreat or harden. It simply remained. That absence of response disrupted the rhythm they expected. Confidence that depends on reaction suddenly had nothing to feed on. The moment compressed rapidly, not into chaos or confusion, but into focus. Space felt smaller. Time felt sharper. The situation clarified itself without noise or escalation. Bruce Lee did not move impulsively or defensively. He waited until movement became unavoidable, and when it did, action arrived with precision rather than force. Timing replaced strength. Instead of meeting momentum head-on, he stepped into the exact moment where effort was unnecessary. Position replaced resistance. Balance was redirected rather than challenged. What had seemed solid moments earlier became unstable because it was never supported by awareness. The encounter resolved itself before anyone could raise their voice or assert dominance. There was no room for it to grow louder or more violent because the assumptions that fueled escalation had already collapsed. The expectation of fear went unanswered. The expectation of confusion never appeared. The expectation of control dissolved without confrontation. What failed was not courage or aggression. What failed was belief. The belief that numbers automatically create advantage. The belief that presence must retreat when confronted. The belief that confidence does not need to be examined. Assumption collapsed because it had nothing to stand on once reality stopped cooperating. It could not adapt because it had never prepared to. The moment ended not through overpowering force, but through exposure. Exposure of imbalance. Exposure of overcommitment. Exposure of certainty that had never been tested against clarity. The collapse was quiet, almost unnoticed by those not fully present. But it was complete. The structure holding the situation together vanished, leaving no path forward for escalation. What remained was stillness again, heavier this time, carrying understanding rather than tension. This is how assumption collapses when it meets awareness. Not dramatically, but decisively. The cafe did not erupt after the moment passed. There was no panic, no shouting, no rush of movement trying to explain what had just occurred. Instead, an unfamiliar quiet settled over the room, the kind of silence that does not come from fear but from realization. It felt reflective rather than stunned, as if everyone present sensed that something meaningful had just happened, even though they could not yet find the words to describe it. Conversation stopped mid-thought. Movement slowed. People became aware of their own breathing, their own posture, their own presence in the space. The room felt altered, not because of noise or disruption, but because perception had shifted. What had seemed ordinary moments earlier now felt layered with meaning. No one announced the change, yet everyone felt it. The energy that once carried comfort and ease had transformed into awareness. The cafe was still the same place, with the same tables and lights and sounds, but the atmosphere no longer felt casual. It felt attentive, as if the space itself had learned something. Bruce Lee stood exactly as he had before. His posture remained unchanged. His expression carried no triumph, no relief, and no urgency. There was no sign that the moment had required effort from him at all. That consistency was what made the silence so powerful. His calm had not been created by the situation, so it did not disappear when the situation ended. There was no celebration because there was nothing to celebrate. There was no explanation because nothing needed to be justified. Words would have reduced the clarity of what had just been understood. Silence preserved it. In that quiet, people began to understand that the moment had not been resolved by force or confrontation. It had been resolved by presence. The absence of reaction spoke louder than any response could have. It revealed that control does not need to assert itself to be real. The silence allowed the lesson to arrive gently rather than aggressively. It did not accuse anyone, it did not embarrass or challenge. It simply clarified. Those who witnessed it began to realize that what they had just seen was not dominance, but alignment. Not victory, but understanding. What made the silence so heavy was that it carried truth without decoration. There was nothing left to interpret or debate. The room had felt the difference between noise and clarity, between assumption and awareness. That difference lingered in the stillness. People resumed their conversations slowly, cautiously, as if aware that something intangible had passed through the room. Voices were softer. Movements were more deliberate. The cafe returned to life, but it did so with a subtle restraint that had not been there before. The silence had done its work. It left behind an understanding that did not need reinforcement. That awareness, when maintained, reshapes moments before they become dangerous. That calm rooted in clarity does not rise or fall with circumstance, and that the most instructive moments often end quietly, leaving behind only the weight of what has been understood. That is what the silence carried. This night was never about confrontation. Even though confrontation seemed possible, it was about something quieter and far more revealing. It showed how awareness shapes outcomes long before action becomes visible. What unfolded did not depend on aggression, strength, or numbers. It depended on perception, and more importantly, on whether that perception was allowed to fade. The night revealed how easily comfort dulls attention. When people feel safe, they unconsciously relax their connection to the present moment. They stop scanning their surroundings, stop questioning changes in atmosphere, and stop reading subtle cues. Comfort convinces the mind that observation is no longer necessary. This does not feel careless at the time. It feels reasonable. Yet it is precisely in that relaxed state that awareness slips away. As attention fades, danger does not rush in dramatically. It moves quietly. It blends into the background. It advances without demanding notice. This is what made the night so instructive. Nothing appeared threatening until it nearly was. The warning signs were not loud enough to interrupt comfort, and because they were subtle, they were ignored by everyone except the one person who never stopped observing. This night showed that readiness does not require tension. Many people associate readiness with stiffness, alert posture, or visible anticipation. In reality, those signals often indicate anxiety rather than control. True readiness can exist inside calm. It can look ordinary. It does not need to announce itself. Awareness, when sustained, allows a person to remain relaxed without becoming vulnerable. Control revealed itself in the same way. It did not declare dominance or demand space. It remained quiet and stable. Control that must be announced is already uncertain. Control that is real does not need confirmation. This night made that difference visible without explanation. Most importantly, the night demonstrated that real presence can end situations before force ever becomes necessary. Presence does not escalate moments. It clarifies them. When clarity enters a space, confusion loses power. When awareness remains steady, assumption has nowhere to grow. What could have become chaotic resolved itself because clarity arrived first. Those who relied on assumption lost clarity without realizing it. They trusted familiarity instead of observation. They believed comfort meant safety and numbers meant certainty. By the time they sensed something was wrong, they were already behind the moment. Their understanding lagged behind reality because they had disengaged too early. The one who stayed aware never lost clarity. Bruce Lee did not need to dominate the situation to control it. He did not need to explain or perform. He simply remained present while others relaxed into assumption. That presence preserved alignment with what was actually happening, not what people believed was happening. This is what the night ultimately revealed, that the difference between danger and resolution often lies in attention. That moments do not become critical because of sudden action, but because of gradual disengagement, and that the most effective way to navigate uncertain situations is not force, speed, or intimidation, but sustained awareness. The lesson extended beyond the cafe. It applied to every environment where comfort replaces observation, where certainty replaces curiosity, and where people believe nothing important is happening anymore. The night showed that awareness is not a reaction to danger. It is a condition that prevents danger from fully forming. That is what this night revealed, quietly and without spectacle. The cafe eventually returned to its familiar rhythm. Voices softened back into conversation. Cups were lifted. Time resumed its slow, ordinary pace. To anyone arriving late, nothing would have seemed unusual. The night appeared unchanged. But something had shifted beneath the surface. What ended that moment was not force, speed, or confrontation. It was a tension that never left. While others relaxed into comfort, awareness stayed present. And that single difference reshaped the outcome before anything dramatic could unfold. This night reminds us that the most decisive moments often pass quietly. They don't announce themselves. They don't demand recognition. They simply reveal who is present and who has stopped watching. Because danger does not always arrive loudly. And control does not need to raise its voice. Sometimes, the moment ends not with action, but with understanding.